It's really my great pleasure to have with me a master and an artist of a very unique art that's maybe rare today. I'm very happy to have with me Anahita Alavi.
Thank you, Fazil. It's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. So, would we start with a quick introduction about yourself?
Of course. My name is Anahita, as you said. I'm a Persian artist. I'm doing Persian miniature and Islamic Illumination mainly. And I currently live in London.
Wonderful. And to get a great picture of what you do and what type of art you are doing, maybe it's better to start from the beginnings.
Definitely. Well, the thing is that my family are from the southern part of Iran. So during the 1980 war, Iran and Arab war, they had to leave their hometown and find a safe place to live. So they came to Isfahan and they started a new life. And that's how I was born and grew up in Isfahan, a city full of visual arts, full of monuments, full of architecture. Dating back to the 17th centuries when the Safavid chose Isfahan as their main capital. Mm-hmm. So clearly my first encounter as a child was basically looking at mosques and palaces that bear the exquisite masterpieces of decorative details, mainly in form of tiles and mural paintings. But wherever you turn your head, you see detailed patterns. Everywhere, on the floor when you walk, on the ceiling when you look up, later on to your left and right, literally every corner. That's how decorative patterns and details filled not only my eyes but also my mind. When you look at those colors and those motifs, it's like they stayed with you forever. Mm-hmm. Apart from that, my father cared for visual art, mainly paintings and photography. He had small collections of Western art, drawings and paintings. Mm-hmm. When I first found that, it was like discovering a new world for me, a very exciting world. I mean, I remember that I'm spending lots of hours just looking at these drawings. When you, as a child, like 9 years old, 10 years old, when you look at those strong and very expressive lines in pencil or chalk, it's like they just revealing very strong feelings, as if you can, very strong emotions, as if actually you can feel them. So imagine how impressive that could be for a very, very young child. It was then that I actually realized a tendency to start learning drawing. Mm-hmm. After taking some courses on drawing that wasn't quite successful, I wasn't really happy with them. I took my first Persian miniature course when I was 13 years old, after those drawing courses. And it was again summertime. When I registered for that course, I didn't have any idea about the style that I'm going to learn. It was quite fascinating because the technique was different, the style was different. When you want to learn something, there is a base, especially in terms of art, visual art. If I want to be more clear, the base will be drawing for all forms of visual art, even sculpture, painting. It's just drawing. So we didn't do that drawing part. We just straight away started with the copying the masterpieces of 17th centuries. And we started to practice the techniques of coloring and outlining and some like very detailed works. My master was back then was one of the most well-known masters in Isfahan back then. I wasn't aware of that. Basically, I knew that she was famous, but she was coming from an artistic family. Her father was a great master as well, and very well known. And after 2-3 semesters, I realized that I needed to know more. It's not enough for me. My weakness is drawing, and that's how I was searching for the drawing classes, and I found one, and then I started taking those classes, and it continued for many years, around 6 years. Our teacher or instructor taught us history of art, and which was my first time to be familiar with the art history, with like the great artists, mostly Western art, of course. She taught us some techniques, different techniques of drawing and understanding and seeing the different ways of seeing the objects. For me, it was very rewarding because it brought me the new knowledge and skill, and it kind of opened a new window for me. We started with drawing some aimless lines for several hours, and then after that the practical lessons started with drawing the still life. And was very interesting because we had a lantern, which was the main item for our drawing, plus very, very, very few more items. But it was mostly that lantern that we had to draw that for like 2 years. And you know, when you draw some specific subject for like, I don't know, 50 times, 100 times, you just want to make a change. But you didn't have this option to make the change in the item that you're drawing. So we started to discover the new ways of changing by deforming the lantern, or by looking at the lantern from different angles. So these were very new for me, and I was just experiencing the new ways of seeing. And it was just like, you know, waking up your imagination and a new, very, very like starting point of being creative. Meanwhile, we had to draw some figures, and we actually practiced different techniques there. For example, one of them that I clearly remember was you have to draw the figure under 30 seconds, and then after that under 15 seconds. So obviously after that the figure will be lost, so you couldn't do anything if you don't draw that under 30 seconds or under 15 seconds, the figure will be lost. So what you had to do, you had to basically draw the motion of the figure by very brief lines, and then deleting all the details.
Yeah, another question is, now you were alert that you need to do more. You have seen maybe a believed weakness, and then you just attacked it with 6 years of art training, Western art training. Would that be a possibility that it would drag you away from the Persian miniatures or the art you are doing today?
Yes, in terms of the technique, it was maybe quite different from what I experienced before. But in terms of the drawing and the base or the ground knowledge, it was quite rewarding, because I knew that for every kind of arts that you want to learn, traditional art, Western art, whatever, you have to be skillful. You have to master drawing. It's like I was preparing myself to be an artist. And I needed that knowledge to be an artist, you know.
It looks like you were really knowing where you want to go rather than just letting the wave take you for this specific type of art or that.
Not exactly, no, because I was very young, and you know, when you're very young, you just try different things until you get the knowledge and get the skill and then feel them, and then you find out your tendency, you find out your like what field you want to continue. So no, I just, what I was pretty sure about was that I want to be an artist, definitely, for sure. And to be an artist, visual artist, I mean, the only thing was that I didn't rush into it to choose something. So maybe that was the good point. Back then I wasn't aware of that. So I didn't rush into it. I just I was just waiting for that. I've had the experience from my childhood, and then I experienced miniature painting. I really like this, but I wasn't even sure that I wanted to be a Persian painter, for example, one day. I knew that I'm going to be a painter, but maybe not very specified.
Interesting. So after those 6 years of art training, what did you do next?
Well, during those years, I was just, as I said, I was just determined to continue art as my field of study and as my career. I did my BA in handicrafts. Handicrafts program was a very practice-based program. It actually provided you with the basic knowledge of all fields of traditional arts. So during the 4 years of university, in the first 3 years, you're practicing different things like carpet weaving, ceramics, Islamic geometry, everything, wood carving, everything basically. It's just a very basic knowledge, actually, basic practical knowledge. And then after that, in the last year, you can choose your subject, the subject that you can focus on, and then you can just, it gives you a chance to learn more about that specific subject. So of course I choose Persian miniature, and Persian miniature basically, in which I also learned Islamic Illumination as well. I worked under the supervision of great masters. They were all great in what they were doing. They were not institutionally educated. They were like practicing masters, but very well known and very great masters. I learned a lot regarding the techniques that they were doing. You know, even when you look at the master's hand, you can learn from him. It wasn't like what I expected, to be honest, because what I expected was during the last year, I am going to work on like very old masterpieces, 15th to 16th centuries or even 17th centuries, but it wasn't like that. Masters had their own style, so they developed their new styles.
Yeah.
After years of kind of apprenticeship and then years of practicing, so they developed a new style, and they just want to spread that style among their students, and they just want to teach that. It was like that. So they had their own style, and they started to teach those style to us. But what I wanted, as I said, it was exactly opposite. I just wanted to start from the very base and then learn the technique, and the technique was the same basically, but learn the drawing, and then learn all the conventions of the 17th century, 16th centuries, 15th centuries, very old paintings. I mean,
Mhm.
there were also a festival. There was also like a kind of exhibition, festival exhibition. That I got just in drawing, that I got the fourth or the third rank, if I'm not mistaken. I think the third rank in that specific exhibition. I was quite happy because it was all the result of my works from the previous time, the pre-university time. As I said, the program was practice-based, the BA program, and I needed to enhance the intellectual part, the theoretical background. So I decided to continue my studies. Continuing my advanced studies needs preparation to do an exam again, but this time to get the admission from like one of the best universities, and it needed hard work, lots of reading. So that's why I stopped working on Persian miniature. I mean, I got admission from the University of Tehran to do my MA in art studies. I actually wanted to kind of look at the other fields of art. And that's how I did my MA dissertation back then, studying Iranian comics. And the relationship, how they get the sources and the inspiration from the folk culture. And I compared that with the American comics. And then when I got my MA, when I actually graduated, I had the free time. So I came back to practicing miniature painting again. You know, copying the old masterpieces is actually is a very important way of learning those arts, because it's not just copying that, you're actually studying the details by copying every light, like every line and all the shadings and all the details. So you're actually studying them.
Yeah.
And so I knew the techniques. So I used the techniques, whatever techniques that I got from my master's, and I actually applied them. And then I knew that I had the skill and the knowledge of the drawing. So I just kind of mixed them, and I started to teach myself. Yes, and then after like few years, I started to teach traditional drawing, which is actually drawing the motifs and the Islamic patterns and the Islamic like motifs. We call it traditional drawing. It means that the drawing the traditional motifs and patterns. So I started teaching this course at some schools and institutions. I also started teaching Persian miniature and Islamic Illumination at Payam-e-Noor University. And that gave me the chance actually to organize and to structure my skill and my knowledge, whatever I gained during the previous years. Yes, and the meanwhile, because I was going to continue my studies again, and but this time I just wanted to apply for a program at SOAS. I got the admission, and I had to, when I got the admission, then I had to move to London, and then I had to quit my job at university and then moved here. I wanted to know about Islamic art from different perspectives, from some like outsiders.
Yes.
I got the admission from SOAS, and I came to London, and it was quite very, very tense program. It was just 1 year, and it was very intense. And then I had to stop work. I had to stop practicing for that 1 year. That MA program at SOAS was in Islamic Art and Architecture well, actually history of art and architecture of the Islamic Middle East. And it was very good. It was very inspiring. I learned a lot. Maybe the only kind of weakness of that program was it doesn't have any course or anything related to Persian art or related to Persian miniature painting, something that I was really looking for. It was a little bit shocking for me, to be honest. So I did my dissertation in Persian painting. I was actually working on Prophet's Miraj, 15th century's Prophet Miraj, the Prophet Ascension. It's a wonderful manuscript. It has the pictures of hell and the paradise and the different levels of hell, of the both hell and paradise. So what I did, I actually studied those figures, those human bodies, and compared them with the ideological discussions regarding the body in Islam. Islam is very obsessed with human body in terms of like how to keep it clean and like these kind of instructions. When you live in Islamic country, these instructions are like your second nature. You know, you're very used to that. You're practicing them every day, basically, without being 100% aware of that. It's like, as I said, you just do that, you know. But as I said, like, yes, these the courses that I have at SOAS was like very inspiring, and that gave me the idea of how we can just compare it, how we can look at these instructions like an outsider, and then compare them with I just compared them with those paintings, especially paintings of hell. When I graduated from SOAS, I started an graduate entrepreneurship program sponsored by SOAS, and through which I started like my courses. It was just a very like kind of the starting point.
Maybe it's good to highlight how people can reach to these courses and what to expect from such courses. Maybe a quick guide on this.
When I first started, the London Middle East Institute at SOAS organized these courses for me, and they just promote that through the SOAS website. And then after that, before this COVID situation, British Institute of Persian Studies was organizing this, and at the same time, the Iranian Art Societies at SOAS is doing that as well. So at the moment, I'm just working with the Iranian Art Societies at SOAS. So they're just organizing the courses and they promoting that. So the courses can be reached through the website, which is the website of the student unions at SOAS, and also it can be reached through my own Instagram page. So that's, at the moment, these two are just the platforms that can provide you with the details regarding the courses. And as for the courses themselves, I teach both Persian miniature and Islamic illumination. And you know, teaching Persian miniature, I mean, teaching each of these two courses needs lots of time. So you couldn't just teach everything in just one or two courses. It takes time, really. But I've decided to break them down. For example, Persian miniature, I've decided to break it down into several subjects. Like in one course, we just focus on landscape, and then all the details, all the natural elements and the details of landscape. The next course is all about the architecture, interior, exterior, and the construction. And then after that, human figures and the rest. I try to start with the basics in my courses. So I try to not to focus on techniques, just to focus on techniques. So I don't want my students take one masterpiece and then start copying that, because you have to be aware of what you are doing. You have to be aware of what you're copying. So in order to do that, you have to have a knowledge of the forms. For example, if it's the natural elements, so you have to know the form. You have to know how to draw that form correctly, and then after that you can start copying them. So that's how I usually work.
Interesting.
With my
Interesting.
students.
We will be sharing the links throughout with this post actually of the interview. So for anybody who is interested, they can reach you easily and enjoy actually the rich experience with you. Going back in the timeline, Anahita, I would like to maybe address the learning process. You have highlighted so, but maybe give maybe important spots of the learning process, the stages, for example, the apprentice model versus the academic model, maybe some observations and a sort of experience to share.
In Iran, they usually start with the same as what more or less actually the same as what I do in my courses. They started with the forms, with the motifs, and they started with drawing basically. And then actually after that, drawing figures, like after knowing or practicing all natural forms, like the form of the clouds, the form of the rocks, the form of the trees, in a way that you can see in the miniature paintings. They usually start with those one, and usually the masters or the teachers choose the 17th century's example as the base or the kind of like the model for the teaching, because 17th centuries gives you a better way to practice, especially figures. I'm not talking about landscape elements or anything else, but just the figures. And since the figures are very important, they're actually the main actors of the Persian miniature. They're telling the stories and they illustrating the stories. That's why they focus on figures. And then apart from that, whatever regarding the landscape is around the figures, they start teaching those ones. So this is like the basics. And then if students wants to practice, like for example, a 15th century is the style or 16th century is the style, I have to ask my teacher to focus on that one. So nowadays everything is different from the way that I started. So when I started, it was my knowledge and my skill comes from university mainly, and also whatever I taught myself. So it wasn't exactly like that. So I couldn't ask my teacher to focus on 15th centuries for me, because it was the university class and it was like a group teaching, you know. And apart from that, the relationship between the master and the student was something totally different from mostly from today. We still have this relationship, but it's a little bit changed now. So before that, you have to rely on your teacher, and whatever he or she prefers and thought it's best for you, he just took that method and then start working with you. But it's been changed nowadays. Your question has the second part, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
I forgot that second part. Could you just please repeat?
Yeah, actually comparing the apprentice model and the
Mm-hmm.
academic model, because you have tried different experiences of, getting trained on an art in
Mm-hmm.
specific. So let's see the pros and cons, at least from your experience. And you are an instructor today, and you know what's good for a student, right?
I don't want to devalue one and then give value to another one. The thing is that, yes, the way that I started wasn't quite the way that's maybe you do as an apprentice, but it was very similar in terms of the relationship between the master and the student.
Mm-hmm.
I think, well, apprenticeship is better because you can live with your master. It's like you can learn from the way that he's looking at different things, he's looking at the techniques, he's looking at everything. The reason is, first is because of that, and the other one is because I really used to looking at the master's hand and learn from that. Because I remember that one of our masters at university, he was old, and when he was working, he doesn't explain. So he doesn't explain what he's doing. He was just doing that, and then if it was your turn, so you had to just focus on what he's doing and just look at that. Don't even speak, don't even do anything, just look at that if you want to learn. So otherwise it's gone. That section was done, and then he wouldn't repeat that, because when it's gone, it's gone. But it's more difficult because your knowledge is basically based on what you see. You kind of see what he's doing, not what you hear.
Yes.
What you see, and then what you practice.
You have to live it and get engaged and maybe devote yourself.
Exactly.
It's much more of a great engagement and living.
Exactly. It's like you experience it at the same time. So, but at the same time, we had a younger master. The way that his teaching was totally different. It was a little bit new because he was explaining that. While he was teaching us, he was explaining that. Again, in terms of the style and everything, he chose that style for us. So in a way, it was very close to the way of the old master, but at least he can just tell what he's doing. So it was like totally different ones. In the new way of teaching, first you can, actually there is, I know that nowadays in Iran, there are lots of masters and there are lots of teachers that they do different styles. So first of all, you have the option to choose which style you want to work, and then you go find that teacher, and then you said that I want to work this style, could you just teach me? And then they will start teaching you. So this is an option, this is an advantage actually.
It's maybe a very good thing to discuss the academic study, the academic experience, comparing, the expectations versus realities, the way you saw it.
The thing is that it wasn't very far from reality. If I just want to be fair, as I said, it was different style from what I expected, because they were just doing like whatever they achieved as the masters. So again, I'm just saying that I don't want to devalue their style. It's just the style that I'm not fond of it. But I know that behind that style, it's lots of experiences and then lots of work, great works. But to have the chance to work with a master, with a practicing master, is something totally different. And I think I was lucky. So apart from the style, I was quite lucky. The style that they were following was the style of Hossein Behzad paintings. He was the early 20th century's painter, and his style was a combination of the 17th centuries, the Safavids painting, and the contemporary Western painting. In a sense of Persian miniature or Persian painting that we know from the manuscripts from the 15th to 17th centuries, maybe we couldn't call those Persian miniature anymore. That's what I think, because that's just Persian painting. You know, it's totally different with Persian miniature. I hope I answer your question.
It's very clear. Actually, very, very clear insight. And we will be seeing with the Al-Nadi audience examples of these pieces of what we call Persian miniature, or in Arabic munamnamat, or zakhrafa, or what we call Islamic geometry, of your selections, actually. But let's maybe stop and discuss about the artist life versus the obligations. For example, school mandates, work, life mandates, whatever that may maybe deviate from the expectation of the artist, maybe top priorities.
So it's not very easy. It's not very easy, actually.
Because I could feel that really in your discussion now.
Yes, because I pointed out several times when I was talking about my story, I pointed out that at some specific times or some specific points, I had to stop practicing because I just have to focus on my studies. It's really hard to have both, you know, and this is the kind of, these paintings are kind of works that they need a peace of mind, and they need you to be patient, and they need time. You know, you couldn't just quickly draw some lines and then that's done for today. Yes, as you said, you have to be actually focused, you have to be dedicated.
Now, the amount of effort and work is required from this kind of artist. How much of practice, how much of hours, maybe what do the artists do for that to keep and maintain the level? Let's forget about those times that we were forced to stop.
Yes, so but as you know, the more time you spend on practicing art in any form, the better result you will get. Definitely. So lots of time, if I'm going to be say, lots of time. You have to be dedicated. You have to start from very base. That might be difficult for some people, you know, to start from very base, especially if they have a little bit knowledge of traditional art or Islamic art. But the thing is that, yes, you have to start from very base, from the very beginning. And then to be a master, and then to achieve, maybe later on, to achieve your new style, your own style, you have to actually delve into the very old styles by studying them, not just by reading the articles or the books, copying them, you know, copying every details. And that takes time, because as I said earlier, it's not just a matter of copying. So you can just copy something, put a tracing paper on top of something, and then just do something unconsciously. So it's not like that. You have to, once you know the form, you can, when you copy something, you know what you are doing, and then you have to be aware, you have to be conscious. So copying consciously, basically. And then copying with the purpose of learning, not just copying with the purpose of creating something. So you do this work for just learning, for just studying. As I said, yes, delving into the old and the masterpieces, the best examples of the Persian miniature, or even Islamic Illumination, or any kind of arts, you know, any kind of traditional arts mainly. And then gradually, step by step, you can just develop your skill, develop your knowledge. And then when you get to that point that you know everything, then you can just start to be creative. You can just start your new style. But the problem is that, you know, when I was teaching at the university in Iran, I was doing the same method, copying the works of the 17th centuries, for example. But I had students that they were keen to create something new, and they keep asking me. It's not the way that you can create something new, you know. You want to create something new, but you have to ask yourself. So the first question is, create based on what? You know, you have to find the specific style or the specific form. And in order to be creative, to create something or to develop that style, you have to know, you have to have the knowledge of the form, and you have to know that style or that specific form very well. You know, it's like the alpha, those kind of a style, or those kind of old styles, is like the alphabet for you to create something new. So you have to know the alphabet. And as I said, by knowing, I don't mean just having the theoretical knowledge. So you have to have some theoretical background, and at the same time, you have to, most importantly, you have to master actually those older styles. But this is something that usually people skip, especially the students, those who want to learn something and then just create something new. They skip that part, and they have some idea and they start creating something new. So this is not the way, definitely, that for example, my masters did. The thing is that you, as an artist, in my opinion, there are three things if you want to be creative. Three things that you have to have. First is your creative mind, creative idea, and then knowing the form, the knowledge of the form, and the knowledge of the style, the practical knowledge and skill, and the technique. So basically, you couldn't create something if you have creative mind and then you have technique. But actually, you can create. I'm not saying you couldn't, but the result wouldn't be a masterpiece, and the result wouldn't be something that will be alive for like several years, for like centuries. You know, this is what our ancestors used to do. You know, when you look at the development from 13th, 14th centuries onto 17th centuries paintings, you will realize that apart from any kind of any fight, apart from any political issues, apart from anything, any defeats, so each new ruler or each new patron or each new center, they developed the new style based on the style of their previous masters.
Mm-hmm.
So, but basically art is not doesn't come out from nothing. So it has to
Yes.
be something, you know.
Mm.
And for us, the masterpieces, the work of our masters, the work of our very, very old masters, I mean, are the good examples that we can create something new based on that. And then to do that, we have to master their work, because without that, without that, it's just, we just create something which is like, maybe it's like just for social media, you know. It's not something as a masterpiece.
Eternal, to stay here,
Exactly.
to stay. Yeah.
Exactly. It wouldn't be something like the masterpieces that we can see. It's something that you take a look at that. For example, when you open your social media, whatever platform that you use, you take a look at that. And then after 2 hours, you will completely forget that. So it's usually like this. The worst thing is that sometimes we know that we have that knowledge about the form. We know that we know the form, but actually we don't. And that's even worse. I'm still taking some lessons from some masters, you know. It's never late to learn something. It's good that you don't be very arrogant about your knowledge, and then always try to learn, always try to develop it. Maybe the way that I know, or the way that I look at some specific form, is not a very correct way. So maybe I have to just see the other people, the other masters, the other teachers, to see how they look at that specific form, how they draw that, to make sure that, okay, what I'm doing is correct.
Yeah. Interesting. And now these three pillars you have highlighted, how do capitalize on them? How can we put more into creativity, technique, and knowledge?
The technique maybe is just the easiest part.
Yeah.
Having a creative mind is something that you can develop it in yourself by exposing yourself to great works of art. Especially, it's very interesting that Persian miniature, when it comes to human figure, is very stylized. But when it comes to nature, you can find very good kind of equivalence. You can find the examples of, for example, that specific flower in the nature as well. So maybe in our field, in the field of Persian miniature or traditional art, maybe the nature is also a very good source of inspiration, source of being creative. You just have to see a lot. You just have to kind of, feel the well of your creativity enough.
And master, one question. You have highlighted focus and peace of mind. How would you advise artists on these 2 points?
It's a very tricky question, especially these days, you know, because we live in a world that kind of makes us very impatient, and it's really difficult to find a peace of mind. This is something that you have to find it. What makes you feel very good during, so every one of us can find something that it gives us good feeling. It gives us a kind of relief when we think about that, or when we look at that. So maybe that's very personal. So something that I know that this specific work of art
Mm.
need you to be very patient. It needs
Yes.
lots of patience. So, but it doesn't mean that if you are not patient patient person, you couldn't do that. It doesn't mean that.
Yeah.
You need to be that, but you can, this is something that you can achieve during this learning process, you know, because as I said, it's a kind of quite long-term learning process, and at the same time it is teaching you how to be patient.
Maybe it's good to highlight the categories of Islamic art genres quickly, and maybe highlight some differences between the Persian, Turkish, Arab, and the different, miniatures, Islamic. I mean, give me a good categorization and some description while we discuss the whole matter of traditional arts.
Islamic art, but actually Islamic art is the art that developed in the Islamic lands during the kind of the time of the Islamic rulers. And it can be the sacred art, and it can be secular art. As for the sacred art, it's non-figurative, non-representational arts. So it's basically biomorphic patterns. It's basically very abstract and stylized motifs of floral or vegetal motifs, or it can be in form of the Islamic geometric patterns, whatever that we can see a lot in the decorations of tiles, and maybe in wood carving, and also in form of the ornamentations of the sacred books, sacred manuscripts like the Quran, or like other books of the like hadith or duas. So these are under the category of the sacred arts mostly. Regarding the secular art, it will be what we know as the Persian miniature. So the difference is that secular art limited to number of people, limited number of audiences, mainly the princes, the kings, and the courtmen, basically. That's figurative art, representational art. However, in a very stylized form, as I said before. So when you look at the figures, they don't reveal any emotion. There isn't any signs of reality in the way that they draw those figures. There isn't any light or any shadow, any source of light or any shadow. So yes, as I said, this is like the secular art, and the main purpose of these paintings is basically to telling the story, to illustrate the part of the story, basically. And you can find this in the literature books, mainly Persian literature, or that's the kind of the difference between these forms of art. So and then you can find this in most of the Islamic countries with the common heritage. You can find in Turkey both Islamic Illumination, geometric designs, and also miniature paintings during the Osmanid period. When it comes to Arab arts or the Arab countries, let's say, I am well aware of the form of the Islamic Illumination, the sacred arts. But basically, Iran, Turkey, and Arab countries, they shared a lot when it comes to Islamic Illumination, and even when it comes to miniature paintings. They shared a lot. It's like a common culture, but they just developed that based on their own taste. There are lots of similarities when it comes to Islamic Illumination, from whatever we called, or like the Persian countries, or the great Persia, the old ones, and the Mamluk ones during the 13th and 14th centuries. Lots of similarities. Yeah, so it's really hard to border them in this
Mm.
term.
Yeah.
But definitely nowadays the differences are more and more, you know, each country or each culture, they developed their own specific style. For example, the difference between Turkish illumination and Persian illumination
Mm.
is quite visible.
And I think they span from China to India to going, to the west direction,
Definitely.
right?
Yes,
Mm.
definitely. Well, basically, as I said, all the countries that one day were the lands of Islamic rulers, they
Yes.
developed this kind of arts, and it was quite common
Mm.
among all these countries, all these lands.
And Master, you have highlighted one thing here, the non-existence of a shadow, the forms, whatever purposes were done for these arts. Is it a religious impact, or what made it form in this way? Maybe a quick highlight from your end.
Maybe it has kind of ideological purpose. Yes, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. It's just my guess,
Mm.
because although they were like secular art and they
Mm-hmm.
meant not to have the public audience,
Mm.
they still they were done under the patronage of um, Muslim rulers,
Mm.
and the painters or the artists they did that, they were Muslims as well.
Mm.
So yes, I think maybe one of the reasons was because to actually um, divide them from the reality, you
Mm.
know, to create something that is far from reality.
Mm.
They are representational, but they're not realistic.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's the purpose, because even when you look at the faces,
Mm.
they all more or less the same,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm.
know.
Yeah.
Even men's and women's, it's hardly recognizable. So I think these are the reasons that they didn't want to create something. They didn't want to get close to what the great creator would
Mm.
create. They didn't want to just like themselves to him.
Uh-huh. Interesting.
So maybe that's the reason.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And as you have talked about the different eras of this art and the way it has changed from a region to another, do you think it is being further changed today with the way we change, the way we teach, the way people learn to be artists, and the introduction of social media, modern art?
Mhm.
Did that impact the art?
I think so, yes. I think so. I think it impacted uh, in not a good way, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it has some advantages, but when you look at like whatever you see in the social media, I feel like
Mm-hmm.
they are like types of works that they created to be exhibited or to be shown in the social media.
Mm-hmm.
And it means it's like, you know, when you just, for example, imagine that when you're hungry,
Mm-hmm.
you're very hungry, and then you just the quickest item, the quickest option is the junk food or the fast food. You know, it's like that.
Mm-hmm.
Quickly you create something without
Mm-hmm.
being very delicate, without being like very kind of
Thoughtful.
specific like skill.
Mm-hmm.
You quickly create something, because as I said, this thing, like this kind of this form of art, I'm just talking about the my own field of art, not art in general.
Mm-hmm.
These forms of art needs lots of details, and of course the applying those details or rendering those details takes time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that can be done quickly. it can be done quickly, but the result will be completely different. So that's the main problem. And the other problem is that, you know, sometimes you see people who doesn't have like good background, strong background, deep background. I'm not saying skill, but like teaching background. They started to just teach that. I don't have problem with that, but the only thing is that we have to think about the teaching in a different ways. So when I teach something, I'm passing my knowledge to other people, and those other people may pass that knowledge to next generation, and this can be continued. So this is something that is very important, and we have to be aware of that. So if I don't have sufficient knowledge or don't have sufficient skill, and then I start teaching even one person or two persons, it might be dangerous for our future generation, because these insufficient knowledge can be taught to another person, and then can be taught to another person. So this is something that we have to be very careful, I think. So not having like 1 year or 2 years of practicing makes me kind of a good candidate for teaching. So we have to be a little bit honest with ourselves. And then I know that it's hard for a full-time artist to financially support himself or herself. It's definitely difficult. It's very difficult. But at the same time, we have to be a little bit fair, and then we have to be a little bit like thoughtful about our future and about this knowledge. But as I said, it has some advantages as well. So having access to other people, so to like the masters paintings, having access to masterpieces, so lots of advantages actually. But I think this drawback is kind of outweighed, you know, in a way. Yeah.
So maybe a direct question, Anahita. Why are you fond of the old art? This is maybe people will go and accuse you of this.
I don't have any problem if they want to accuse me, because first of all, I enjoy what I'm doing. I enjoy it a lot, and apart from that I am that's my favorite style. So apart from that side, which is very strong, I feel like so, you know, that's like our heritage. And for example, for me as a person who is interested in this kind of art, I have to pass this heritage to my next generations, you know. And to do that, I need to pass them, I mean, I need to give them the opportunity to practice this, to experience this, and then they can be, if they want, they can be creative, they can be have their own new style, develop whatever they want. But if all of us stick to our new style, you know, and then we start spreading that, we start teaching those new styles, then what will happen for heritage, you know? It might be, you know, I know that modern art, contemporary modern art might be quite fascinating for people, especially very young generations. but we don't know what will happen in 20 years, in 50 years from now on. So maybe there is 1%, 2% who wanted to know about these these specific styles of painting. If we don't leave anything for them, so it will be lost, or knowledge or skill or technique, everything will be lost, and they have to start over. They have to just they couldn't use our experience, they couldn't use our knowledge. They have to gain all the knowledge and then everything by themselves, by delving into paintings, delving into books, and it might be difficult to find a master's. So I think if I called myself a traditional artist, so I personally think this is my duty, to pass this knowledge to my next generations and the next generations, because this is something that this kind of arts were alive for centuries, and then we shouldn't just stop this stream. It has to be continued. So, and then some people have to do that, and then I'm very proud of myself to be one of those persons. I mean, if I can.
Actually, you are doing very well, and this kind of question is there everywhere, in the writing and the music, in the arts, everywhere. This is a current question, and as you said, you cannot create something out of nothing. So there should be a continuation, a diversion, and let's say a change or evolution, if we might say, to the arts or whatever cultural products that we do today as artists we are. Maybe it's a good time, Anahita, to share some kind of artwork or a masterpiece and then discuss it with our audience. How about
Definitely. Yes, definitely. Yes, of course.
What would you select for us?
I do have 15th century, a masterpiece from 15th century is the Horoscope of Iskandar Sultan. So the reason that I chose that is because I did a replica of this one, so I kind of studied this one by copying this work. It's like a very big and very ambitious project.
Wow.
So yes, as I said, this is the Horoscope of Iskandar Sultan, a masterpiece from 15th century. He was actually a Timurid prince. He was the Timur grandson, and he was a devoted patron of all kinds of arts and also science. So this is a very exquisite example, actually, of the royal library production, what actually be known as a workshop. And it's a good example of collaborative works of different calligraphers, several calligraphers, and also the collaboration of paper makers, the gilders, the kind of astronomers, and of course the painters. So in the royal libraries or the royal workshops, it was quite common back then that a group of artists and artisans and also apprentices, they usually gathered together, the best of them, of course. They gathered together and they worked on different projects. So, for example, one person was just responsible for making the paper, the other one was responsible to just drawing the lines, kind of the ink lines, and then framing. The other one was responsible for gilding, applying the gold, or like some people was responsible for applying the colors, and then some people were just doing the faces, rendering the details, and then doing the faces. And then we had calligrapher, and it was just literally a group of best artists. Nowadays, we don't have this one actually. From 17th centuries on, that concept of the royal workshop is not alive anymore. So we don't have such a concept because we don't have those great patrons of art. That's why from 17th centuries we can see only just a single portrait or single page paintings, because they could be done quickly in terms of the details. Especially the landscape is much less details than the works of 15th and 16th centuries, and it can be done quickly, and it can be accessible. I mean, it can be affordable for like normal people, like maybe like the rich traders or something like that. We still have that, so we don't have the great patronage, so that's why we usually can't see these forms of productions anymore, as we can see in this example. Usually we see less ambitious projects. If I just want to talk about this specific painting, it's actually depicting the position of the heavenly bodies at the time of the Iskandar's birth. You can see the angels at four corners. They're carrying the gold crown and the large circles in the middle. They're carrying the large crowns because they're predicting a very good kind of life and prosperous life for Iskandar Sultan. And the large circle in the middle has 12 sections and representing the astrological houses here, I mean.
Yeah.
And then inside these sections, you can see the smaller circles. In each house, basically, you can see a kind of representation of a sign of the zodiac. Then also inside those 12 circles. For example, Venus is like a young woman playing lute here.
Yeah.
Or Mars as a warrior with a sword and also several heads here in the other hand.
Yeah.
Although the figures are quite tiny, the faces are quite tiny, but they just revealed that they just shown in great and meticulous details, you know. Especially I understood that when I was trying to copy this specific work. As I said, it's a production of several artists, something that rarely happened today. And the reason that I decided to do, I was just having some idea of producing such a detailed work. Only just one person. Definitely I'm not calligrapher, so I haven't done the calligraphies myself. Let me just if you don't mind, let me just share my own painting, then my own copy of this work. So this is actually my version of this painting, and I just wanted to have an idea, how would it be if this work will be done by much fewer artists.
Wow.
So I just ordered the calligraphy to a master, so he's the best. You can see that, you can just compare the kind of the calligraphies, and even in the middle, the calligraphies in the middle. And the thing is that when I was doing that, I was here in London and he was in Iran, and then so he had to write these calligraphies on a separate paper, and then I had to just after that to just glue those calligraphies on this paper, on my original paper. It took lots of work and lots of energy because I didn't have anyone to make the gold for me, the shell gold out of the gold leaves. And then I didn't have these colors are all kind of the handmade colors and the earth colors, mineral colors, basically.
Wow.
And also the golds are just real gold, so they're just the shell gold. You can imagine that it can be like a very kind of
How long did it take you?
well, it's hard to say because it's not like you work on a piece of painting from early morning when
Mm,
you wake up until you go to bed,
mm,
because it makes your eyes tired very soon,
mm,
especially when you just focus on such details. So you have to give yourself a little bit rest. So
mhm.
it's really hard to say, but definitely more than 6 months, maybe like,
Wow.
I don't know, like 10 months. And then yes, so I have to just make the colors myself, make the shell golds myself. And it was quite it was a very rewarding experience,
Mm,
because you know, when you copy such a work, you can understand the difficulties, the challenges, you can understand the amount of work, the amount of time that you have to spend. And apart from that, you can study the details, you can study the like the faces, and as you can see, it has at the same time the non-figurative motifs and the figural motifs. So I think it was a good, very very good example for whatever I do. I work both on Persian miniature and Islamic illumination, and this piece of work contains both. I wish I
wow.
was a calligrapher and I could experience calligraphy as well, but unfortunately I'm not.
Soon, soon.
Who knows? No, I don't
But
have any time to spend
but
that.
Anahita, you have been living every master's effort here in this work, because you are representing the whole team except for the calligrapher. It must be a great experience. You have been facing a lot of challenges and problems that you need to solve all by your own self.
Yes, as I said, lots of things that needs lots of preparations actually that needed to be done by myself, while it used to be done by, for example, apprentices. You
Mm,
know, making the color, preparing the colors,
mm,
preparing the paper,
mhm,
and like making the golds, and then all this, and then just drawing the lines and copying the work, tracing the work on this
mhm,
paper. So it's all like lots of effort, and
mm,
something that I think you have to do to
mm,
realize that when you say some work is a masterpiece,
mhm.
so what that it means.
Yeah.
And yes, and of course I learned a lot through working on this piece, and also like other pieces that I've done, like other paintings that I've done, the examples of 15th centuries and also the examples of 17th centuries
Would it be
experience.
possible to zoom in a bit?
So
And for sure, you said this is an old piece, so you have put some limits or maybe some freedom here and there for making decisions on whatever colors, restorations, things maybe you needed to change from the old example, or is it a replica?
I tried not to make a change. So
Mm,
even in terms of the color, I tried to actually mix and create the color, which is maybe not exactly the same, but
mm,
close to that color. In my other works, especially like my new works, I try to make a
yeah.
change and try
Mm,
to modify those works. But in terms of this one, I mean, when I decide to study a piece of painting,
mm,
so I try not to make any change in that one, and then
mm,
just follow whatever is
yeah.
there. So even in terms of the color, even in terms of like the motifs,
Mm,
everything, I just try to stick to that specific painting. I know that it's really hard to look at the painting in your laptop and then try to find the exact color or the very similar color. It's really hard. It's not easy.
Yeah.
And of course, the result wouldn't be exactly the same, color.
This is magnificent work, really. So great. You keep looking into the details. It's like infinity.
Thank you.
This is a lot of patience in there, for sure.
Definitely. And then it was,
Yeah.
I would say it was my first time to do like such a small and tiny faces. Not the angels. The angels are like quite normal, but the faces inside these small circles and even in these sections, they're quite tiny. And yeah, they were like my challenge, you know. But it was a good
Interesting.
challenge. It was very, very rewarding. I think it's worth it, definitely, to
Yeah.
spend that much time on this.
It's a great piece of work, really. And what's the dimension of this work?
Good question. I don't remember it exactly. Uh,
If we compare to an A4 or maybe A3, or just to give a perspective to...
it's between A4 and A3. It's not A3 exactly. It's smaller than A3.
Is this a commission or for your own?
No, that's for my own.
But
That's
you
for
do,
my own.
but you do have commissions, right? I think.
I do have commissions and I do sell my artworks as well. But this specific piece was just for my own curiosity to make it.
Wow. Interesting. And I encourage our listeners to go and visit your Instagram, and
Thank you.
maybe the links we'll share later on to see the masterpieces and the love of this kind of art and the new pieces that you are creating.
Thank you. Thank you. And it was some very interesting fact regarding this manuscript, this masterpiece. When it's done, as I said, it's meant to actually predict a very fortunate life and very prosperous life for Iskandar Sultan. But it was quite opposite. He actually died when he was young. He didn't have very, apart from that, he was a great patron of art. He didn't have like such a life that they predicted for him. It was very sad, of course, but it's very interesting fact.
Yeah, at least we have the piece of work.
Exactly. At least we have the masterpiece because of him. Yeah.
Interesting.
So,
Anahita, how accessible are these great pieces of art today and back then? And how do we know this is a masterpiece, this is a very good piece of information that's great for the artist and those who really love this kind of art?
well, definitely, if I want to compare the accessibility of these kind of paintings and the masterpieces with when I was a student, so I would say that nowadays definitely it's widely accessible thanks to social media, thanks to the digital versions of all these paintings that has been done by the museums or the libraries. And for example, if you live in London, it's easy for you to go and see these works in person. Back then it was very difficult because there weren't any digital version that much of these paintings. We just had some photos of like photos with the like less quality, but nowadays like there is, when I say digital version, I mean with a high resolution. But back then we didn't have like this option, we didn't have this opportunity. But it's very good because you can, I really actually prefer, when I want to work on something, I prefer to find that specific piece of painting through the museum's website, because I have the opportunity to zoom in to see the details, and I always suggest my students to do the same. From all around the world, you can just, with one click, you can just have access to that painting and just look at the details, and that's I think that's the advantages of the widely use of internet and or maybe modern life.
Great. And how to pick the good pieces and the good information? We have a chaos of information now.
Yes, well, you mean by the good piece, you mean the old ones or contemporary ones?
For beginners, people might be confused by going to the maybe not the great pieces or the great factual pieces of information. So do you guide them in a certain criteria of finding the good ones?
As I said, it can be the museum's websites and the library's websites provided you with the very good kind of visual information. And then, of course, if you want to know more about the specific painting, you can just take a look at books. There are lots of good books in Persian miniature written by great scholars, and that can be definitely accessible, I think, these days to everyone. Usually at the end of each, when you go to the museum's websites, most of them usually had the references or like the further reading guidance. So those can be very good.
Great, wonderful. Anahita, one last question.
Yes.
We need a recommendation for a piece of music that we will put at the end of the interview.
Maybe I'm not a very good person to recommend because I'm not a musician, definitely. So whatever I say, it's just like my kind of favorite or whatever I think is best. So I personally, I suggest the works of Maestro Hossein Alizadeh, one of the masters of classical Iranian music. And if I just want to be very precise, I can recommend Sallane. The instrument is called Sallane, actually, which is not one of the traditional classical Iranian music instruments, but it inspired by some of the ancient carved stone of Persia. The instrument is actually revived and performed by Ustad Hossein Alizadeh, that he's actually performing the current classical Iranian music by this instrument. So it might be interesting for your audience.
For sure.
Listen at this one.
For sure. Thank you very much for this recommendation. Anahita, we have really had a great interview and a great exposure to your experiences and this kind of unique art, really. Thanks for this great interview with a master like you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, and it was such an honor to talk with you and then to have a chat. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then we'll meet again for a more in-depth interviews on this kind of art. Thank you very much.
Hopefully. Thank you.
Yeah.